Hello, everyone. This is the Revolutionary Think Tank podcast. This is episode 23. And if this is the first time you're here, this is a podcast about political commentary, protest music, and revolutionary thinking. And today is a very special episode because we actually have a special guest here. So, as you know, I'm 4IS. This is my co-host, Mr. E, and special guest, NyQuest. How are you both
Welcome,
going today?
NyQuest.
Hello,
Very
everyone.
well, very well. Thank you for IS. Hello, NyQuest. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello, Mr. E. Hello, 4IS.
And the reason why we brought you in here today, NyQuest, is we actually want to start doing another segment of our podcast where we talk to working people. We talk to, what's kind of important for their industry. How can we make you as a working person and the people around you, how do we make things better for you in society? And like that's kind of why we want to talk to people in various industries. Like to be honest, we've done Beecraft with you, we've done art with you, music, and I think you're one of the fortunate people that also works in the industry. So tell our audience who don't know much about you, what do you do?
Okay, hi, everyone. So I've been introduced by alias NyQuest, which is a electronic production, music production name or alias that I go by. I suppose that artist profile has developed in a particular stylistic area within electronica or electronic dance music. I would describe as synthwave, if you're looking for a keyword search term for Googling. But that's not everything that I do. In so far as I'd like to frame that "what do you do" question based on what 4IS introduced. So far as me working in industry, I have worked and continue to work in the music industry in a number of domains or areas. I've worked a little bit in film. I have some good stories and some terrible stories. I've worked a lot in events, very specifically. I have DJ'd. I have produced music. My 9 to 5, so far as that is relevant to this conversation, is in music education. And additionally, working in music education and the depth to which I do full time and 5 days a week, sometimes more. I have musical related degrees from my undergraduate to my master's to my PhD. So whatever those 3 pieces of paper represent, that gives me some level of qualification, I suppose, to talk about music. And my experience in the music industry, I suppose, gives me some level of authority to talk about my experiences in the music industry and in music education.
So do we refer to you as Dr. NyQuest then from now on?
You'd be the first person, Mr. E, and you are welcome too, for the purposes of this interview, or this discussion, rather.
Thank you.
Well, my next question, Dr. NyQuest, is another reason why we kind of wanted to start this series is that, well, it's a point that gets rammed home from us, from government all the time. They always like to say, "Oh, everyone has done it tough." The pandemic has been a massive strain for everyone, and for that, I kind of want to flip it on its head, where it's like, okay, yes, that rhetoric and that sentiment, it's nice, but as a music teacher, you as an artist that does beatcraft, if you could be in government for a day and whatever you suggested to them, they implemented, say, as a consultant. If you were a consultant and you asked them, hey, you should do X, Y, and Z for the music industry, what would you suggest to them?
Would you be interested in me replying to that in 2 different parts, where I might speak to the music education industry differently to music as an industry, as a production industry, perhaps, or a performative industry, or
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah, go for it.
All right, cool. So let's speak about the music industry at large first. And I suppose there have been a lot of changes recently. There was the Sony Australia controversy recently when it comes to, like bullying and harassment in the workplace. And I think there have been a lot of changes in that regard. I think music has also been very, the word that comes to mind is shook, but I think that's a good term for being remodeled by requirements of diversity and inclusion. But I think also, like in the example of the small controversy between, I think it's Kim Petras and Wendy Carlos as transgender representatives in the music industry and Grammy Award winners. I think music has a long history of diversity and inclusion. So, that's something to be proud of. But look, I think what the music industry has always struggled with, and a lot of industries continue to struggle with, those that, and you may want to re-question me on this statement, but I would posit as an essential industry. A lot of essential industries, so defined, are underpaid industries, and artists, and the depth of preparation that is requisite of their craft and education that is requisite of their craft, be it vocational or tertiary, is not recompensed as a structure within the industry and within society. We've actually got to change a few hearts and minds about what it is to be an artist and a creative before we're able to get policy change, I think, as well. There are people, I can actually give you a name. I'm so pleased with myself that it's come to mind. I haven't had enough beer yet. Mark Dreyfus is his name.
Yes.
Perhaps you've heard of him.
Yep.
Excellent. I've got 10 points for mentioning a politician. 4IS is very pleased with me. So yeah, look, Mark Dreyfus, for the musicians that are listening, is the son of George Dreyfus, who is a very, very famous Jewish Australian composer, musician. I know him as a composer. I'm so sorry for anyone that knows him better and knows him as all the other things he was in music. But I know him as a composer. Okay, he for people my age and older that are listening may know him as a TV composer, which is important to the music industry in Australia because it is very. The music industry in Australia has close ties to, and is, I would say, strongly manifests within the film and television industry. So, like the film industry in Australia is very strong.
And that's yours. And that's your substantive position in the music industry, isn't it? Composition.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Mr. E. Right. I haven't made that explicit, have I, at all?
Well, like that's in the background of your educational side, and your real position in the industry is composition, right?
Yeah, look, I'm sorry I didn't mention it before. It's just that it's actually something that is so fundamental to my educational background, my function in that industry, both education and just music production. So yeah, I forgot to say that's actually, so I could fill in the gaps by saying that all my degrees in music are composition based.
And more specific to that, they're electronic music based, right? That's your background.
Yeah, if I can speak specifically for a moment, but not too at length. Composition and electronic music, I can say with pride, at a place like the Sydney Conservatorium and Sydney University, are kind of synonyms almost. They are aspects of each other. So whilst I don't have an electronic music bachelor's degree necessarily, in saying that I have a composition degree at a place like the Sydney Conservatorium, and with its history of just certain personalities within Australian electronic music that are actually very well known in Australia, overseas as well within Australia, but also just the history of like development of electronic instruments, if I can put it that way, in Sydney, specifically represented by a place like as was New South Wales Conservatorium, then became the Sydney Conservatorium when it became part of Sydney University. And yeah, that particular pedigree is very strong. in electronic music specifically.
Mm.
It's kind of not even a choice I felt whilst there.
Mm.
Moving on to Indiana University, where I went next, I specifically got a computer music degree there. Called composition officially, but its aspect, its domain was computer music.
Mm.
Okay, and insofar as that is, a subdomain of electronic music, which I would argue it is, that is a speciality that I have at the master's level.
Mm.
Moving on to the PhD, that does actually say at a transcript level that I have a general track composition degree, which doesn't mean that I didn't heavily involve myself with computer and electronic media, but I also had to specialize in acoustic, specifically classical chamber and orchestral music.
Right.
Okay. So
and
yes,
you tie together heavily when it comes to computer music, electronic. It's not just audio that you're dealing with as well. You've specialized in the integration of audio with visual
yes,
technologies, right?
Yeah. So specifically my PhD, and I only on the maybe I could say the twilight of my PhD, I discovered the integral link between sound and visual sort of corollaries. So I built it into my PhD, but I was really very juvenile to it at that point, and it has developed much since, both in, I would say, a professional sense and a innovative sense. But yeah, I wish I had more time studying my PhD, because I was only just at the end of it discovering how much I enjoyed becoming a visual artist through music, if I could put it that way.
And have you integrated that into your educational contribution to your industry and specifically your passion there?
Yeah, absolutely. So although I haven't fully moved on to discussing what the music education industry is and what it needs, I can answer your question from both perspectives, just to fully answer your question. So from an educational point of view, yes, I think it's very important to educate my students in the developments in visual media and how important it is for people that are self-described audio technicians or specialists in creative industries in audio, should also have skill sets and technical proficiencies in visual media as well. Okay, even if that's an aspect, I can say from a professional experience point of view, when I have been an audio technician, I have had to know about video media and video outputs, just as almost as a reflex. Okay, and I had no formal training in that area. Let me say specifically. So the conservatorium, I was about to say Indiana University. I need to backtrack on that. They did actually give me some training in video editing, but not in a live or events space. It was more studio craft video editing.
Right.
Okay. Right.
And when you say live, you're talking about interactive kind of like installations where it's both an audio and a visual kind of interaction between the artist or the piece itself and the viewer, right?
Yeah, that was part of my training coming into my PhD at the University of North Texas, yes. But also, if I can say, not just installations, but also now I have discovered commercial applications for this as well. So when I made reference to being an audio technician, those are things like perhaps running a government event and having to put captions in lower thirds, or queuing up video media that might be for Tourism Australia.
Okay.
I've put a microphone on a prime minister. Sorry, that was a very random thought, but that was all in the same space as being an audio technician. Sorry. But yeah, so...
and you've carried that all the way through to even stuff like VDJ, right?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, that is my most, thank you for preempting me there, but yeah, I'm building up to, my most recent experience is sort of going into a lot of nightclub spaces and perhaps like bars, event spaces of the evening, and sort of supporting live acts like DJs and live electronic artists, also MCs, by sort of putting their branding up and animating that in concert with sort of live generative visuals or live preset visuals.
Yeah. And so the point of this podcast at large is got to do a lot with revolutionary thinking, obviously, but it's also a critique of our current economic situation and how that influences the political realm. And then so we discuss heavily about the influence of working people on the economy at large, and then obviously what type of role they really should be playing in the way the world works. So with a bit of an understanding of what it is that you do now and your background, then how do you think that, one, your education and training, but then also the types of employment that you found yourself in, how do you find that you as a working person contribute to society at large? What is your contribution? What is it that you bring to the party for society?
Yeah, well, one thing I didn't get to talk about yet is sort of how I involve myself currently in music education as well, that 9 to 5 that I described before. And maybe I can use that to answer your question here. So my main contribution, I think, like when I think, honestly, like if I was perhaps on my deathbed right now and I was thinking to myself, what have I done to maybe make some sort of an improvement on maybe not humanity, but any sphere of influence I have had, it is perhaps transferring musical knowledge that I have gained through experiential things in industry or literally through education and mentorship, things that I can then repackage and pass on to a very specific generation we're dealing with now. I'm finding a lot of skills in myself, and a lot of my drive comes from trying to quite honestly transliterate my learning into something that is digestible for the types of minds we have amongst us right now. And look, they're not all like, how do we describe them? The youngest of the generations now, my children, or the young adults I'm teaching at the institute I teach at right now. But it's also like I do have mature age students and people, my peers in age and older, and I do have a job to speak to their interests and their level and their understanding to the universal teachings that music offers, either practically or through pedagogy and education.
Well, okay, and that touches on what I really want to draw out, though, that like the response you've given is, I would say, quite general to any type of teacher or someone that is passing on knowledge for the betterment of society at large. But specifically, you're in a cultural form of the economy. And cultural, I think that cultural aspects of the economy at large and just how society works are underrepresented in terms of their overall contribution to how the world works and how important they are to just us being social beings at all. And like they're undervalued in that sense, especially on the political level. But they are large drivers of economic change and all that sort of stuff. And so what it is, apart from the passing on your knowledge and training the next generation or the next group of thinkers, what is it that you as a cultural producer and a cultural educator in the arts contribute to society? What do you think? Do you ever think about that? What it is that you do as a composer?
Yeah. So my best contribution perhaps is the way I want to describe it is a form of cultural mediation. I don't know whether I've been crowned with that at all. Maybe it's more.
And what does mediation mean in that sense?
So my position in so many places, so many domains that I involve myself within music as an industry and music as a pedagogy, music as an area of education. I feel like I exist in an intersection. Now, perhaps that's me trying to deal with my imposter syndrome in a lot of different cases, but genuinely, I think I exist in an intersection. When I was at the conservatorium, I'm sorry to make this still more about myself, I felt a little bit out of place with the classical people. I felt at home with the electronic people, but sometimes not always. Wherever I've been in music, long story short, I feel I have sort of existed a little bit at an intersection of proficiency or of understanding or whatever it may be. Also culturally, I feel as an individual, being of interracial parentage, I think in that regard, I exist at an intersection. My partner is of Indigenous lineage and my children by extension. So in that regard, I care about their issues. I am not necessarily of their lineage. I exist at an intersection. That is also connected to the way that we're supposed to be perhaps dealing with music education at the moment. There is talk, but perhaps not enough action in the area of decolonizing music. And there, I believe myself to exist at an intersection. And I can facilitate and perhaps mediate and arbitrate because of the places that I believe I exist at this intersection.
And when you say decolonize music, more specifically, is that in terms of like Western influence on the music sphere? You're talking about tearing down those walls, or?
Yeah, well, just coming to a place where we need to understand that the fundamentals of music and how that is personally and perhaps culturally manifest in the individual may have very different fundamental principles and salient features. Okay? And I taught a lecture today, if I can speak very specifically about recent experience, where we were talking about electronic dance music. And 4IS described me as a beat craft artisan or something like that before. So I then am someone that cares about or has proficiencies in electronic dance music and its production. We taught a lecture about how students should be listening to this sort of music that surrounds us, that self-described style, EDM, and how you can identify its features and perhaps reverse engineer and make it yourself. And so sort of teaching EDM, particularly looking at that acronym where the dance part is there, I think there is a fundamental nature or the integral nature of dance in the structure of the music. Signals for dancing, the actual act of dancing, and that's, something that is absolutely fundamental to that particular domain within music production, but is so foreign to perhaps the experience of participating in orchestral concert music or a choir performance or even religious music experienced in a cathedral, perhaps. There is so much of our culture that I think denies what is, our culture is Western music, perhaps, in this statement. There's much in that music culture that denies what is fundamental about other musical cultures. Okay, and I can give you a very specific example from my research, if you like.
Please.
Go for it.
The Greek word for chorus, okay, in the original translations from the Bible, from Aramaic or whatever it was, I discovered in some of my research while at the University of North Texas doing my PhD, I discovered that word was deliberately mistranslated from the original Aramaic into Greek. The original word was to mean a throng of dancers, not a throng of singers, and they deliberately translated it to a throng of singers because in that cultural aspect, from whatever the original language was or the mediating language into Greek, they believed that worship did not include religious or spiritual dance, only spiritual singing.
Interesting.
So they deliberately mistranslated the word, and that has lived forevermore in our cultural tradition. What a mistake.
And so you were saying, to bring it back to what you were saying earlier, you're standing at this kind of crossroads or an intersection of various cultural elements that can feed themselves into what it is that you do and how you contribute to, I guess, your part of the cultural niche, and you're blending these elements together. You're arbitrating on what's coming and going, and you're trying to influence the spheres to try and open up people's minds to, I think, potentially things that have been lost to us or to new things altogether.
Yeah. I have the great cultural advantage, personal privilege, privilege of my nationality, perhaps, being Australian, and our economic advantages to be well educated. And from that, I've been able to be educated in the way that a lot of professional musicians have. I can read music. I can critically listen to music with training. I can use professional audio equipment to a professional standard. I am very, very lucky to have had not one degree, but three. With all of that understanding and also the sensitivities of perhaps my cultural exposure in certain areas that may or may not be music only based, I think that is the intersection that I can stand at. I can bring things together and say, I had to read music to prove I was a musician. You perhaps do not have to if other musical fundamentals are able to be built into your core skill set. And maybe one of those is dance, to bring my point home, by the way. And to be very clear with anyone listening, perhaps you come from a cultural tradition that dance just makes sense with music as a natural expression. Unfortunately, there's a lot of cultures out there where that is not true. And perhaps we have designed it that way, and perhaps decolonizing music is reverse engineering that.
Interesting. I also liked how throughout this section, you've used the word intersection in order to describe this situation. And I want to hone down on that idea because a lot of recent controversies have happened where composers that are within, certain IP or certain products have basically had their work stolen away from them. So I guess I want you to kind of speak towards those controversies and, how can we improve the situation of artists that are thrown into those kind of situations? Because it's really disgusting when you think about it.
Yeah, look, it's anyone in the creative industries. I'm not going to make claims for musicians alone, but anyone that is an artist or an artisan or responsible for original content production or the development of, as you described, 4IS, intellectual property.
Yes.
It's a dangerous world out there for them. I don't think you're making mention of NFTs, but hashtag NFTs. We're talking about it. Here it is.
Specifically, I'm talking about the Mick Gordon controversy that happened recently.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, no, thank you. No,
Yeah.
we should definitely build that into this discussion. So I know the three of us in this discussion, we have when we have collaborated musically, Mick Gordon has been a reference for all of us. I know personally, I identify as a sound designer, and Mick Gordon as a individual, as an artist, as a creative, is very now linked with the franchise Doom, very popular computer game and now video game, on consoles as well. So he's a composer. So in my capacity as a composer, I teach from his work. I'm a fan of his work. So to answer the question now directly, the controversy, also to give context to the question, there was an issue, a controversy involving intellectual property theft, and essentially conditions where an artist was working without contract, even though there was a very strong history of prior work. And I would also argue in this particular case, a very long history of strong associations of branding, not only with the central computer game and its narrative, but the composer involved. His name became ubiquitous with the franchise, and that was traded on along with his intellectual property without his permission. Okay? So to make that clear again, just in case that wasn't quite clear, Mick Gordon, the composer that wrote the music for a number of chapters in the Doom franchise, which is a first-person shooter video game that is no stranger to controversy in its history. It has very recently and very famously stolen not only the name, but also the music of a famous Australian composer. Perhaps you can hear from the accents of those present that Australian issues is something we here care about. And Mick Gordon was not fairly treated in the strongest of the music industries in this part of the century, okay? the games industry and its arm in music is very strong, not only in the minds of creatives that are buzzing around trying to get work, but I think also in the success stories of those involved. Okay. Maybe I can't speak for Mr. E, but I think 4IS is a gamer.
Yeah, very much so. Yes.
Okay. So I'm a relapsed gamer. I think I'm starting to play again. But I do care very much about those musicians or those composers that contribute to it. Okay. And I very much am proud of Mick Gordon's work, not only as a composer, but also as an Australian and someone who represents aesthetics that I wish to support. Like Mr. E made reference to me as an electronic artist and composer, electronic musician, various things. All of those are true. And Mick Gordon's creative practice, professional practice, is very, it's just saturated in electronic music media. And I love his work. And even his methodologies align with my own. I know that's not the point of the Revolutionary podcast, but I care about those things. So as insofar as you, yeah.
But I guess more to my question though is that Mick Gordon's been thrown into this situation where his work that has been integral to these projects, they've basically been commodified, and the people that own that IP, they've felt like, we have this work that he's done with us. We now own this. We'll do anything we want to it. Hey, we'll even exploit that piece of work and take it away from him if we feel justified in doing that. And really, at the end of the day, I guess where my question was asked going is that, well, we probably want to increase the rights of composers, because really at the end of the day, I'll speak from my part from a gamer. When I've played the latest Killer Instincts, when I've played the latest Dooms, the whole point of the music is to get you into a rush, get you into a flow state. So when you're facing off against your opponent, whether that's another player in Killer Instincts, or if you're facing off against demons and trying to kill them, the music was really important because it got you into that flow state and it made the experience what it was. Yeah. And for them to just turn around and exploit him, it completely devalued his part in the product.
Yeah. So for anyone listening that's sort of new to the concept of the function of video game music, and particularly in this case with games like properties like Doom and Killer Instinct, as 4IS mentioned, music in interactive software and also film and television as well. The job of music is to support action and to support visual stimulus. And like 4IS is describing there, Mick Gordon's solutions for supporting action and visual stimulus in the properties like Doom and Killer Instinct are just the best solutions. They're excellent music, they're adrenaline pumping, and like I described, the aesthetics is kind of perfect and very, very appropriate to the narrativity of the games that he works on. So to bring it back, so that's just a big agree with 4IS, but to answer your question about like what sort of happened to him and why it's really bad for the industry, really specifically, Mick Gordon's name became really important with the brand of Doom because his music, like 4IS describes, is just so excellent. And it's so excellent not at the behest of the company. It's actually because Mick Gordon fulfilled his duty to creating the music for that particular game, Doom in this example, because he didn't listen to the company and what they wanted. He knew his job so well. He's such an amazing composer. So I actually teach from this particular industry example all the time. So when he was first engaged to start writing for ID Software with the first example with the new Doom game, what was it called? 4IS? It's Doom Ultimate, isn't it?
No. I think it's just called Doom 2016. They just called it Doom.
Okay,
it's
cool.
referred to as Doom 2016. Yeah.
Okay, so for anyone listening, I'm sorry if I'm not 100% of the details. What I really care about is Mick's music, right? Because it's so amazing. And it's amazing because He was given a brief for this video game commission for music. They asked him, they said, 2 things you must do in order to fulfill the music requirements for this game. The music, number 1, must sound like the old Doom game. It must sound heavy and, like, what did you say before, 4IS? Adrenaline pumping, and it gets you in the flow state, okay? And it's because there's so much kinetic energy in the music, okay? In the first example, just to give you context, it was a lot of heavy metal music, Metallica-esque and stuff like that. But the second thing they asked for him in the brief was for there to be no guitars. Yeah,
Really?
this is what I teach. Okay, so this is the legend of Mick Gordon. Listen to this. So he goes away, and this is something else I teach in some of my classes. He goes away and he makes like 20 tracks. Okay, I might have the logistics wrong for this, but the sentiment is pretty clear. He went and made a bunch of tracks. Half of them, he went and made what they asked for, which is essentially the aesthetics of someone like Aphex Twin, which is like intelligent dance music. It's really wobbly. It's great, but it's not the original Doom music. Let me put it that way. And then he made a bunch of stuff that was similar to that, but with heavy guitars. Pulsing electronic beats, Beatcraft as he called it before 4IS, but with heavy guitars as well. And he gave them like, half-half. And you know what they voted for? What did they vote for 4IS? They voted for the guitar stuff because that was Doom.
Yeah.
Mick Gordon is an amazing composer because he understands the brief, okay? And that's a really important thing for a creative industries person to understand to thrive, okay? So I know the real point is to say how government and those higher ups can help us, but the bootstraps principle for creative industries people is to know your job and do it well, so then we can really hand it to the higher ups that need to pay us properly. And there's something that you're going to have to ask me about again later. Now, that's the legend of Mick Gordon, but the actuality of his circumstances now has ended up being that his name, because the music was so good, became associated with Doom. They then used that name to stretch out the commission to a number of other properties in the franchise. There's a remake of Doom, and he did the redo of the score. He reproduced not just remastered, he reproduced all of the tracks and made them more Mick Gordon, and he made them more awesome. Now, he did a bunch of that, firstly for a completed game that wasn't released, but then later as demos. And then there became a little bit of an issue with his engagement with the company where he was working off contract. That's the way I want to describe it. And now, you all need to do your own Google research or media research to follow this story and see what happened, and actually listen to his interview that he did recently. But all of this information I've gotten from his Twitter description of what happened to him. He was working off contract, and the company as well, allegedly, hired another composer to work in his style, meaning that word that I used before, his musical aesthetic, was appropriated specifically by another composer working parallel to him, producing the same tracks. In the event that he would not comply with a later contract, and they would then have a backup composer to aid in a release of the game. ID Software, as a company, I know from its history, me knowing a little bit about ludomusicology, which is the musicology related to music and games, I know that they have a very strong history of announcing properties before they're developed. They invented the software pre-release.
Right.
Okay? All right? Now, they've got a long history with that. Now, to balance that out, they've got a strong history of releasing games in freeware. So there's an essence of the promise of the internet that is being upheld by them, but then other things that, and it's not. Like, we are still supposed to uphold intellectual property rights. And in this story, Mick Gordon, this famous video game composer that is an Australian, that is a composer, that is a creative, he was not treated fairly by the industry. In fact, worse, his intellectual property and his name was stolen. To make it clear, his name, Mick Gordon, was released with that pre-release, even though they were planning to replace him as a composer. I know this is horrible because I was engaged in a $10,000 contract with a company that I don't mind naming called The Art of Multimedia. And they went against the contract, rewrote the contract, and put another composer's name on the contract. And when I argued, they wrote me out of the contract. and there was nothing I could do. They said,
Wow.
take me to court. So now my name's not there getting associated, but my intellectual property was definitely sent to the orchestrator, and I was not compensated.
And I think this is really important to talk about. And
Yeah.
like, while there might be a question before of how is this relevant to the Revolutionary Think Tank podcast at large, this is an age-old story, and one that is just repeated across the capitalist world and our economic system. It is the expropriation of the value that is added into any type of system or industry at large by creative people, even if they're not doing work that we would define as creative, like some type of artist that's producing some type of cultural media. Even if they're just providing some type of physical or manpower or labor or something like that, there's still some type of creative input there that is adding value into the system, which is being expropriated by somebody else. And most importantly, or well, as equally important, the person that creates the value is being alienated in the process. They have the value and their creativity that they have worked so hard on to develop, not just in the product themselves, but like in the case of Mick Gordon here, their brand, their name is being torn away from them. They are being alienated from it completely almost. And that is just used to push a product. And so while I think that, he has contributed to the commodity that is this game at large, and that's what he was always there to do, to kind of commodify his creative input, the fact that it has been stolen from him in such a way, and then I guess used without his permission, ultimately, that is a greater story that is happening all of the time in our society, and it is going unrecognized. With someone high profile like this, you have a lot of people that might sympathize and empathize with him because they really value his contribution. But like, there are a lot of working people out there, and your story, which you were kind of drawing an analogy to there, who's there listening to your story? And like, even the audacious response to any of, I guess, the issues that you had with what happened and unfolded in that scenario, what was their response? It was basically, you don't have the ability to do anything about this, because they knew they had you in a bind. Because what were you going to do, really? Did you have the resources to represent yourself legally? And were you going to be able to do anything about it? No. And this is how the capitalist kind of system works in essence and at large. They know that there are working people out there that contribute to the economy at large with all of their individual inputs, and it relies heavily on the fact that they negotiate themselves into corners, or just basically don't have the means to fight the system or the owners of capital or the owners of industry and all that sort of stuff. And so they're continually being shortchanged because for their creative input and their general input into the system. And that's just how it works. And that's how the system keeps chugging along, and profit is made through that surplus labor, that additional value that's added in by hardworking people like yourself, like Mick Gordon. And that is just accumulated into small groups or into small associations of people, and is used to make profit on. And like that, I think the ID software case study is really important for, I guess, what we're talking about at large here. And that's why I would like to bring this back to the very first question, I think that, or one of the very first questions that 4IS asked is, then, you seeing all of this type of stuff, is there any way that you, as a consultant advising government, or if there was a world government, let's say, like, is there any way around the issues that you see that plague the people that actually creatively contribute to your industry?
Yep. Look, I mean, there's a few things we can reverse. Australian government has very recently stripped a lot of money away from the arts. Okay, and I've touched a few of the different domains within music as an industry. I've described electronic music, I've described classical music. They're all very different in the way they operate. They've got different bureaucracies, they've got different sort of um, different personalities and just the different methods of operating, you know, and different budgets too, to be very, very honest. And I have to say, you might think there's any number of those arms that are, you know, healthy and wealthy and thriving, but it's just not true. They're all struggling, every single one. And it's the people that really are at the bottom of those hierarchies that suffer the most. Okay. The largest pieces of any of that pie is really going to those people at the top of those hierarchies within the music industry. And there are many, many hierarchies. And the people that are really making it work down the bottom are really scraping by. And I'm not saying that there is no collegiality down the bottom. There certainly is. But they're all suffering together. We are all suffering together. And yeah, we have solidarity in that, but you know, that common notion of the starving artist and how much there is a lack of support for it, it's never worked and it's never going to work.
Yeah,
we're in a little bit of a, you know, considering capitalism. Capitalism at least used to give us strong patronage, I thought, and I don't even think we have that anymore. So at least there were benevolent capitalists once upon a time. Far be it from me to speak well of capitalism, but we don't even have the proper benefactor. We don't even have the patrons anymore. Yeah, look, they exist. Okay, there are still sponsors for, you know, the Sydney Symphony Orchestra and stuff like that. But those top level performers don't get there without the grassroots support.
Yes.
In Australia, we understand that about sport, right? We understand that about sport. We even, dare I say, to you two, political scientists, is that what you are?
Yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah, let's go
with that. There is even grassroots politics, is there not?
Yes, very much so. There's,
you know where the grassroots music is? Where's grassroots music? Auntie and uncle and mum and dad, they fund that. They fund it. If they believe in it well enough.
If they do, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. If their culture supports it, perhaps.
So if you were to be in government, that would be one of the first things you would do to establish
grassroots.
Yeah.
Grassroots action. Well, and look, am I allowed to say? I think it's money first. Shut up and give me money. I think it's true.
Well, look, yes. Sorry.
No. I think just one more to say is like it's money for arms, not money for vehicles. Like, I'm not trying to flee this. We're trying to fight this, and we're trying to give, you know, the right support, the right strength to the grassroots movement in music and support for the industry, right?
Yes.
So, and I think that's also to recognize everything that makes it work. And I actually don't believe in removing all the. Maybe I'm calling it describing it wrong by calling it bureaucracy, but I think like those people that dedicate themselves to music and entertainment administration, they are absolutely needed.
Yeah.
Okay. And their ethical education is absolutely needed. Okay. Because they help artists do what they need to do. And that is to focus on their craft. Okay. And every well-oiled machine has many moving parts. And our industry, be it education or production or everything else, events, it needs so many things: technical support, everything. Okay, like smart artists recognize, like those at Abbey Road, that even the T lad gets put on the record cover. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, seriously, you know what I'm saying? Like, everyone's important. Is that not a musical socialism? That's what I want.
That is, and you know, everyone's contribution is important, and by extension, because everyone has some level of contribution, they have some level of input in the decision-making process then, and they need to be validated in that regard. They need to have some type of say to make it to make the system fair. And that is just by extension our values surrounding democracy at large, and like how we expect there to be some I guess, level of fairness in any system, and that comes with being able to have a voice. And so, like in the hierarchical kind of systems that you were talking about, those people that are, kind of doing it so hard at the bottom, they have very little say, if any, in how these institutions and how, like, I guess these industries work at large. I am conscious of time, but I really want to ask you this because I think this is really, really pertinent to, I guess, our discussion just in terms of things revolutionizing just generally. But as an artist and a creative, what do you see in terms of impacts on working people specifically, if we can get that specific? What impact is the AI revolution going to have on working people like yourself?
Interesting. Look, I am in a position to say, because I have educated myself in music AI very specifically, and what it is affording artists at the moment. It is not at the level, although I believe the onset is coming very, very soon, to be able to, be able to fool the listener into it being as well produced as, a professional that takes 30 years to build, the professional itself, right? It may be a danger, but here's the thing. I do believe that our understanding, even the layman's, okay, so the common person's ability to critical listen to music media is so strong that AI doesn't have a hope of really taking over the importance of music and the industries within music that I understand.
Okay. So you don't see, like in capitalism, a big part of technological advancement is the displacement of a large proportion of the working class.
Yes.
You don't see displacement happening en masse anytime soon, or even ever, almost.
No, not at all. These AI tools, I strongly believe, and time will tell, of course, and reflection will certainly tell us as well. I think it's going to improve the music producer, the composer. That yes, I think it's going to improve us. I don't think it's going to reduce us, not at all. Because, and this is what I truly believe. Our skill set is already so strong. It's just like shooting lightning into a lightning cloud. It's just going to grow the bastard, waves going into the tide, like it's just growing the swell. I think that it's just going to arm us to be more proficient. Your ears. Sorry, not your Mr. E, not yours 4IS, because I would describe you both as in and of yourselves musical professionals. But even those around us that are not musical professionals, their ears are great. I know they are. I train amateur ears all the time, and those ears are not so amateur. Our ability to discern what is made by human and what is made by machine is very strong. And I need to tell you that when a human uses a machine to make something, we very consciously humanize what we're making to circumvent the machine-like motoricness of whatever we're creating, particularly with electronic and computer media. Now, AI is not great at doing what we do unless we tell it to. And we're not great at telling AI to do stuff yet. So until our spoken language or written language is able to describe music to a point that anyone can produce it from descriptions in semantic language, then I don't think we're going to be able to create music that well. And I'm fully aware that AI is not only educated on text and language, it is also educated on literal complex waveforms, i.e. music, produced music, high quality produced music. So yep.
Is a good way to describe what you're describing is until a robot thinks like a human or a human thinks like a robot, we won't be in trouble.
Yeah, pretty much. Now, I can speak specifically to Mr. E's question. There is an AI music generating software called Boomy AI. I know personally, I've told you both about it before. I have done my own research with the software. I have asked it to replicate my speciality within music production, particularly through education, and that is in, let's say, experimental and ambient music. That's how I'm going to describe it to you both today.
Mm.
Now, I have asked it to do what I do, and it can't even come close. Okay? Now, it is like asking a pianist who specializes in jazz to just improvise something classical. You just won't get it. They will give you how they see classical music from the perspective of a jazz-educated, jazz muscle-memoried proficient. They won't be able to do it in a way that you recognize as an aesthetic that is classical. And that is what AI is like right now. It is a tool that can make music. It can make music that's okay. But, you know, I see it as very much at a stage that's very, very, very basic and very, very juvenile almost. And it's so easy to hear that it's not professional.
And so much, I think, of this conversation is about the creative production that is done in society. But then looking at your other, or the other arm of your employment, your bread and butter, which is in terms of social production. So educating the next generation or the next group of thinkers. How do you see AI in terms of its contribution or its impact to the educational arm of what you do?
Once again, enhancement. Again, on the more academic end of what I do in music education, my postgraduate students are going to have to work very, very hard, I think, to fool me and to fool my colleagues in their ability to manipulate that tool to produce academic prose that is going to, successfully fool the system, the educational system as it exists. Okay, we have checks and balances for that. We always have, you know, things like style and referencing and formatting and stuff like that. The AI is just not doing too well at the moment. Okay, and it's all based on the same principle that the original thought required of critical thinking when it comes to synthesizing academic references is not something AI is doing very good at the moment, unless you're able to educate it yourself. If you can't educate yourself, you're not going to be able to educate AI. So technical and academic and educational proficients are always going to be needed to educate students in the same way that they need to educate AI. So I don't think my job as an academic or as an educator is in danger. I don't think my job as a music producer or as a composer is in danger. I just don't think AI is ready to fight me yet or to fight us. Certainly not in a Terminator capacity. We're not there yet. Okay. So yeah, look, I just don't see them taking my tools. They are my tool now. This is mine now, you know.
Another tool in the belt. Interesting.
You know, and I just have to be smart enough to work out how to use it. That's all. You know, and it's on me. You know. So if you want a term, like if I reject AI, I'm just a Luddite, in my opinion, right now. That's all.
Yes. Very interesting perspective, because yes, to be on the forefront of any new technological changes where it's at in any industry anyway. So to, I guess, be dismissive of something like AI and its incredible potential is to potentially sign one's death note in an industry, because if you don't embrace the change, you can be consumed by it and left behind. So very interesting. But I'm really glad that you gave us that perspective, because I know that's something potentially on the mind of a lot of our listeners. It's definitely on my mind, AI, especially with my circumstances and the place that I come from. AI is integral to our lives and how everything functions around us. And we are on the precipice, I think, here in the early 21st century about where AI is going to take us all and change, if not negatively, just change generally the way that we do things in many industries.
Many. And yes, you are correct. Music is no different to any other industry that will be touched by it. No,
apparently not.
But you look, I'm sort of hopeful for it. I think the technology will sort of be able to just add to our capacities, not detract from them. So
yes.
Do I have time to say anything about educational reform at the grassroots level at all?
Please, we've got a couple more minutes left.
Lovely.
Please.
Yeah, it is something that you tried to prompt me towards, and I feel like I sort of danced around it, and I wanted to get there. I never found the time. So, well, I made mention of course, about Mark Dreyfus before, and he's someone that I think sort of cares a lot about policy change in the arts, but also about music education as well. I think it's not just music, but perhaps arts and creative education at large. One thing that I can think of for anyone that's listening that perhaps doesn't self-identify as a creative, I recently read a paper that identifies an extension, and maybe this is not new to some people, but one of them is, so the acronym is usually STEM, right? In education, we care about science and technology and it's education and maths, is it?
Yeah.
Is that what it is? No, engineering and maths, sorry. Okay. I read an article where they identified STEAM, and the A in that acronym is the arts. Okay, and just to put it really simply, like you can make a robot and you can make software that goes along with that. You can engineer all sorts of things, and you can use maths and use science, and you bring it all together. But like, do we really ever use that technology without a narrative that goes behind it, or some kind of a artistic concept that sort of brings it to a sort of function in our lives? Like, how much of sci-fi, which is literally creative fiction, right, and art in a form, how many times has art led innovation? How many times has a sci-fi concept created an actual invention that became part of our modern tool belt, as it were?
Isn't the classic one, was it 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea? Didn't that preempt submarines?
Is that
Jules
right?
Verbs,
yeah. Well, there you go. And actually, I'm going to get sidetracked by it, but there's a really famous Australian that invented Wi-Fi for submarines. And anyway, it's just, there you go. If we didn't support that creative, we didn't support that creative. It was her dad. So there you go. Anyway, back on education, I think we need to do grassroots stuff. We need to bring music education to the very, very first day of kindergarten. Before those kids say their name, they should be singing together. Like, just blanket statement. Music at a fundamental level, cross cultures, needs to be at the onset of childhood education. Okay? And we're already doing that. I think for those of us that have experiences of parenthood, we know how important it is to sing to our children. Many of us do. And so why are we doing that when our child first gets outside of the safety of what is usually their educational space, the family home? All of a sudden, they're going and doing that whole methodology in education, that whole pedagogy in a very different way. And I just know that music's not there enough. I know. And it needs to be. Okay? Because back to that cultural aspect, I think some children might not talk, but all children will vocalize and get close to singing. So we should be starting there. Okay, and that needs to be put in policy. Mark Dreyfus, please get that educational reform in and bring music to the front. And remember, STEAM is the way, not STEM.
Right. Okay, well, that's a good way to bookend this podcast episode. Thank you, NyQuest, for coming on and discussing these ideas with us.
Dr. NyQuest, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Dr. NyQuest, thank you very much. And we always do synthwave art. So this week is NyQuest doing his electronic music. You can probably see it in the background there. Hopefully that I'll give you it, NyQuest, and hopefully you can use that as album art for later on. It looks quite impressive. So yeah,
I really like the whatever the writing is in the center of the image. It looks like some sort of alien language. I love it.
Yeah,
that's great.
I'm glad you enjoy it. And as always, remember, guys, to keep thinking and keep learning. And Mr. E, if you want to sign us off.
Before you do, can I just quickly give a plug to our Red Alert event? Is that all right?
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Just real quick. You can see on the visual that 4IS has very graciously put up for us there, Surveillance Party. Can you go, please, look at surveillanceparty.com and go get your tickets if you are in Sydney for Red Alert on May the 6th, okay? There is going to be a SynthRave, it's called. Okay, there's going to be so many styles of electronic dance music being played. It's a SynthRave. There's going to be space wave and synth wave and retro wave and all sorts of really awesome music sort of themed around this Red Alert event, Soviet Wave. It's going to be great. It's on, what did I say, May 6th, and 4IS and Mr. E are going to be making an appearance.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the pitch, Dr. NyQuest.
Yes.
We'll put the details on the uploads, in the various uploads. So keep your eye out for that, everyone. And please remember, as always, I am, you are, we are Mr. E.